Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Black Folks United. My name is YHWH and I'll be your host again. We've been discussing the holy days in the Bible, and we have been trying to be as thorough as possible in discussing this important topic, as many of you know. And just in case you missed some of our previous programs on this discussion, we've decided to do a brief recap on some of the things discussed pertaining to Yah's holy days. Some call them feast days, festivals, holy days, the annual Sabbath, pilgrimage festivals, whichever term you want to phrase them. We're speaking today about the holy days mentioned in Leviticus 23, Numbers chapter 10, and throughout the entire Bible. Even the reason we've taken so long to doing this topic is because the holy days are from Genesis all the way to Revelation. You just got to be able to go in there and find out where they are. But the holy days are in practically every book in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So it's taken quite a bit of time in covering this topic, but I promise you, you won't regret tuning in tonight, because we're going to recap on the topics that you may have missed earlier in some of the earlier programs. So briefly, one of the first things that was brought out in the holy day topics was the fact that the annual pilgrimage harvest festivals were just that. Unleavened bread festival, Pentecost festival, and the festival of tabernacles. These are all pilgrimage festivals. That's right. They're festivals that you have to make a pilgrimage in order to participate. You can't celebrate pilgrimage festivals at home, in your backyard, at your local place of meeting. No, the annual harvest pilgrimage festivals written in Leviticus 23 are all pilgrimage festivals. Unleavened bread, Pentecost, tabernacles. A perfect example of this being a pilgrimage festival, a national event, not a local event. This is a time when all of the tribes came together to worship at the temple in Jerusalem. Acts chapter 2 is a perfect example of this being a national event and not just a local event that you can celebrate within your local area. You had to make a pilgrimage, and this was done 3 times a year in order to celebrate that event. If you didn't make the pilgrimage, you didn't make the holy day. You couldn't do it where you were, and that was a commandment from the Most High. The Most High, the Almighty Yah, and we do use the name Yah, and you can find that written in your Bibles in Psalms chapter 68, verse 4. We're not talking about a man. We're not talking about a creeping thing. We're not talking about anything that swims in the ocean or flies through the air or nothing like that. No statue or nothing like that. We're talking about the true and living, invisible Creator of all things. One who you have never, nor I, have ever seen his likeness or similitude. So if someone's telling you that he's Yah, the Almighty Father, and you've actually seen him, you know right then and there that that's not him, because you have never, neither have I, ever seen Yah. Never, and probably never will. He's an invisible power, and he's too great to be seen. And anytime we have seen him, it was through an angel, okay? So let's not get it twisted. And for those who think that we're some people that is talking about some brother or some sister being Yah, the Almighty Creator, that's not us. That is definitely someone else. So we've been talking about we're doing a brief recap on the holy days. And if you missed it again, the unleavened bread, Pentecost, and tabernacles were national events. These are national events. Yah is a nationalist. He wants, for his festivals, he wants nations to be gathered in one place at one time with one mind on one accord doing the one thing that Yah loves to do, and that's be at one. Because Yah, our source of power, is one, as the scripture says. So he wouldn't have us all divided on his holy day. There's enough of that already. So we were just doing some recaps, and that's one of the points that we brought out in our previous shows about the holy days. And the fact of the matter is, if you're celebrating Pentecost and it's not a national event where thousands and thousands and thousands of people are gathered together in one place in Jerusalem at the temple, you are not celebrating the biblical holy day of Pentecost. Modern day preachers teach that it's just a local event that you can do, in small little groups here and there. But no, the biblical event is a national gathering in one place at one point in time, all on one accord, and doing the same things, bringing that offering to that one city, to that one place where y'all's name is. And that place, even today, is still Jerusalem. But only when there is a temple set out for y'all's name do you actually go to that place to worship him during the holy days. They are not small local events that you can set up in any city or, practice in your backyard with a group of your friends and stuff like that. No. Absolutely not. Yah is a lot bigger than that. They're his festivals, and he sets the rules and not us. We also covered the fact that when they did assemble for these Sabbaths, these rest days, these feast days, holy days, Shabbat days, festivals, whichever term you choose to use, the gatherings were during the daylight periods. There was no sundown gathering. These were all, in Acts chapter 2, they were gathered together as early as 9 o'clock in the morning. And even in the book of Nehemiah, when they were gathered together for the first day of the 7th month, which was a new moon convocation, as well as the first day, 7th month is trumpets, another sacred holy day for the Most High. They gathered together during the daylight periods, early in the morning, just like you get up early in the morning 6 days a week and go out and go to work. They got up early in the morning to worship the Most High on all of the annual Sabbaths, including the weekly Sabbath. Now, just like you do on the weekly Sabbath, you get up during the daylight period and come together and have a weekly Sabbath day, which is not a worship day. The weekly Sabbath at the synagogues and the places of assembly were gatherings for the read out of the law and the prophets. This is instruction time, so don't get it twisted. This is instruction time for the weekly Sabbath, and that's quite evident. Just read Acts chapter 13, because it states that after the reading of the law and the prophets, that's when Paul and Barnabas gave their exhortation to that assembly at the synagogue in Antioch. So now the weekly Sabbath is set up for instruction. The annual festivals are set up for worship. And so let's be clear on the difference. There's no public worshiping on the weekly Sabbath. That's for instruction. The reading of the law and the prophets, they prayed, they sung the hymns and that sort of thing. Question and answer, exhortation. There's no worship on the weekly Sabbath. He set up the worship times a year, 3 times a year. The Most High is very specific when and where and how to worship him. And we don't do that when we want to. That happens on his terms. And he set that up 3 times a year. So we also covered the fact that the unleavened bread and the Pentecost and the tabernacles were actually harvest festivals of the land. Something that is very much left out in a lot of the Hebrew Israelite assemblies today. You have to deal with the fact, in order to truly celebrate these Sabbaths that you read about in Leviticus 23 and in 24 and in Leviticus 25 and in Numbers 10, you have to accept the fact that these were all harvest festivals. Harvest. And in order to participate in a harvest festival, you must have land. That's right. You gotta have land in order to partake of a harvest festival. So also we brought out the fact that not only were they harvest festivals, the unleavened bread, which was the spring harvest, was the time for the barley harvest, the spring harvest. And that was during the days of unleavened bread. And so the Most High also set up another harvest festival called Pentecost. which is during the wheat harvest. And that's centered around June, July, during that period. We also dealt with the fact that the Festival of Tabernacles is during the fall harvest. And that's when you had the fruit tree harvest, the grapes of the vine harvest, and that's when that harvest was brought in. During these harvest festivals, this was the 3 times a year that the Israelites brought the tithe offerings to the Levites. That's right, tithe offerings to the Levites. Something else that the modern day preachers choose to leave out when they talk about the issue of tithing. See, tithing was done 3 times a year and only during harvest time. These were Yah's holy days, as well as this is Yah's land. And so he allowed you to have a harvest 3 times a year, and a requirement for his holy days was that 1/10 or a tithe out of each one of those harvests be brought up in the form of wheat, fruit, grain, livestock, brought up 10% from all of the tribes and given to the Levites who didn't have any land. And so this was only done 3 times a year. And so the very important fact to remember about that is, number 1, tithing has never been money. Number 2, tithing has never been anything you do once a week out of your paycheck for your hard-earned do-re-mi. Tithing is something done 3 times a year and is given in the form of food, grain, livestock, fruit from a tree. This is tithing. That's why when you read about tithing during the Levitical priesthood era, it's talking about that you have to eat the tithes. I mean, even if you go as far as into the book of Malachi, Malachi says, "Will a man rob God? Wherein have you robbed me? In tithes and offerings. Bring you all of the tithes into the storehouse, so that there might be food in my house." Now, even today, riding down the highway, you look off to the side of the road, you see these farms, you see those big silos on the farm, big silos, that's the storehouse. And there's not money in those storehouses. There's grain and wheat and corn and vegetables and stuff like that. That's the storehouse Malachi is talking about. But the modern day preachers are hoping that you don't go back and do any reading. And like Peter said, the modern day preachers, they're really counting on you not going back and studying for yourself and showing yourself to be approved, so that you won't be ashamed when they come to you and throw this tithing mess down your throat and try to make you feel guilty that you're not giving 10% of your paycheck every week. But again, study these things out about tithing. Abraham had just fought a war. He had just fought a battle. He was bloodied up, had been killing folks with his sword and all of that. He had an army. And what do people do when they defeat their enemy in war? They take the spoils of that war. So Abraham had just took the spoils of the war, and he met Melchizedek, who some call Melchizedek, either one. He met Melchizedek, now what was Melchizedek? He was a high priest and a king. A high priest and a king. Someone who you give the tithes to. The spoils of war. So Abraham, after fighting that battle and being victorious in that battle and taking the spoils of war from that battle, that's why he paid tithes to Melchizedek. Now, what do that have to do with anybody else? And he did that one time only. And so people will try to use that to get you to come up to their place of whatever and give them 10% of your hard-earned money every week. Taking some, again, what we try to do is show you where things are taken. When you hear this type of stuff, people either have a hidden agenda or they're just totally taking the scripture out of context. So that is not a commandment for any of us to give any of them 10% of our money. That is just simply talking about a story about Abraham, the father of faith, as they call him, and how he fought a great battle, won the battle, took the spoils, and when he met a king and a high priest, he gave a tenth of the spoils to a king and a high priest. But I don't see anybody who's a king and a high priest, although we do have some brothers going around saying that they are priests after the order of Melchizedek, some more foolishness. But again, Melchizedek, king and high priest. So anyway, now we also covered that. So don't fall for the okie doke with the Abraham and the Melchizedek tithing nonsense, because it's sheer nonsense. It's just something designed to rake money out your pockets and make somebody rich. So study again to show yourselves approved. We also covered in Numbers chapter 9, a very good topic, because Numbers chapter 9 tells us that if you are unclean or if you are on a far off journey, Numbers chapter 9 is giving us the information that we need to understand that if you are unclean the first month of the biblical year, which is doing the unleavened bread, you cannot celebrate Passover. If you are on a far off journey during the first month, according to Numbers chapter 9, if you are on a journey of far off, just like we're on the journey now in America, far off from the place where the offerings are to be brought, which is the temple in Jerusalem, and during the wilderness time, it was the tabernacle where the Levites were. If you were on a journey of far off, where you couldn't bring that offering to the temple or bring that offering to the Levites in the wilderness around the tabernacle, or if you were unclean where you had to stay away, you could not celebrate the Passover. You couldn't do it. And again, what we were bringing forth and sharing Numbers chapter 9 with you, which a lot of the false teachers won't share with you, is the fact that Numbers chapter 9, if there was any time for the Most High to communicate to the Israelites that you or anybody else or they could celebrate the festival of unleavened bread anywhere they were during that time, that would have been a perfect time for him to do so. But he didn't do so. What he did do was say that if you were unclean or on a journey afar off during the unleavened bread festival, that if you were clean and back from your journey in the second month, then you would have to bring that offering the second month to the Levites in the tabernacle during the wilderness, or to the Levites during the temple era in Jerusalem. Either one, that's where you had to bring the offering. The second month, if you were back from your journey or if you were clean. The second month, you had to bring that offering to the place where the offerings were commanded to be brought. And you also had to celebrate the Passover unleavened bread celebration according to chapter 9 of Numbers, according to all of the ordinances of the Passover celebrations and according to all of its rites. So some people were quick to tell you that, well, Passover is just a day, one day that you just eat unleavened bread and drink you some wine and that's it. But according to the voice of the Most High Yah in Numbers chapter 9, when he communicated to Moses through the voice of his angel was this: if you are back from that journey and you are clean in the second month, then you must by all means bring your offering to the Levite to have that offering offered up to the Most High at the temple in Jerusalem. And if you did not do so, you were cut off. And we mean cut off forever. No, nothing. You were cut off forever. So being cut off is a very, very, very dangerous thing to let happen. So you don't want to do anything tripping over false doctrine to get you or anybody else cut off. And I sure hope none of us do. And I certainly don't want to be cut off myself. So this is why we're spending the time to go over these holy days, because it's very important to us not to be cut off during the time of for fooling around and messing up y'all's holy days. Because in the book of Zechariah, it talks about who's going to get cut off. And that's in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8. 2/3 of the people of the Israelites in the land will be cut off. And that's word, that's book. So we don't want to fall for nobody's private interpretation pertaining to the holy days and end up getting ourselves or other people following some foolishness that man has set up and get us cut off. And a violation of Yah's holy days, as written in Numbers chapter 9, is one of the things to get a person cut off. No kingdom age, no resurrection, no eternal life. So this is a very serious topic, and this is one of the reasons why we're discussing it. So we also discussed evil King Jeroboam in 1 Kings chapter 12. The evil King Jeroboam, and how if you ever want to see an example of how not to celebrate Yah's holy days, 1 Kings chapter 11, 12, and 13, the story of the wicked, evil, self-serving King Jeroboam is the perfect story to read to understand what not to do when it's time to celebrate Yah's holy day. Again, when you celebrate your own mess, you can do whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do it, and with who you want to do it, and how you want to do it, and you can offer up whatever when you're dealing with your stuff. But we're talking about Yah's holy days today. So King Jeroboam, this wicked king, this self-serving king, what he decided to do was to use religion. And we brought out the definition of what religion is. The root word of religion means to hold one back from the truth, to restrain somebody from following the truth. That's the root word of religion. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can just simply go look it up. Okay? And so this is what we advise everyone to do. Don't just take our word for it. Go look up these things. Go read these stories for yourselves. Prove all things, as the scriptures say. So the wicked, evil King Jeroboam used religion to hold back the truth and to hold the people back in his northern kingdom from going to worship where they ought to go worship, which was Jerusalem, and to bring their tithes and their offerings and their sacrifices to travel from the northern kingdom down to the southern kingdom of Judah and bring those offerings and tithes to the Most High's house. King Jeroboam would not allow that. So what he did was set up a false religion, and he set up places of worship in the land of Dan, and he set up places of worship over in the mountains of Ephraim. And he set up a golden calf in the city of Dan, and then set up another golden calf in the city of Ephraim in the mountains. And then he set up altars. And then he told the people of his kingdom, "These be your gods, O Israel," and had them worship false gods on a false holy day that he set up. And of course, according to Numbers chapter 9, that caused him and all his followers to be cut off forever, ever. So they were cut off Because according to Numbers chapter 9, if you were clean and not on a journey far off, and that wasn't a journey far off because they were in the northern kingdom, that wasn't far off. They were cut off because they didn't bring their offerings to the house of Yah at his temple when, where, and how the Almighty Yah commanded them to. So following King Jeroboam and following people like King Jeroboam, according to Numbers chapter 9, will get you cut off from your eternal life. And I pray that don't happen to any of us watching this program. So this is why we spent so much time discussing King Jeroboam. And so if you want an example on what not to do and who not to follow in today's time, go read the story of the sins of King Jeroboam and the false worship that he set up. Now, we also discussed the fact that, contrary to popular belief, Yah established his name in his house. And, there's a doctrine being taught that because you don't see the word Jerusalem written in the Old Testament Torah, then it's null and void that Yah's name is placed in his house in Jerusalem, because you can't see the word Jerusalem in the Torah or the law. So what we set forth to do was to show that in Deuteronomy chapter 12. Let me read that real quickly. It's a false doctrine when someone teaches you, because you don't see the word Jerusalem in the Old Testament, that is not the place where Yah chose to place his name for everyone to come up and worship, which is Jerusalem. Now, we covered Deuteronomy chapter 12, and I want to read that real briefly. It says, "You shall not do after all the things that we do here this day. Every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes, because you are not yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which Yah, your source of power, gives you. But when you go over the Jordan River, and when you dwell in the land which Yah, your source of power, is giving you to inherit, and when he has given you rest from all of your enemies all around you, so that you dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which Yah, your source of power, shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. And there is where you shall bring all that I command you. There is where you will bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes." Now that shows right there that you couldn't do tithing anywhere and any way you please. "And you shall rejoice before Yah, your source of power, you and your sons and your daughters and your men servant and your maid servant and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he had no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to yourself that you offer not your burnt offerings in every place that you see, but only in the place which Yah shall choose in one of your tribes." That tribe is Judah. That land that was given to Judah is Jerusalem. That's their land. So Yah placed his name in that one tribe, Judah, in that land of Judah, at Jerusalem, at the temple in Jerusalem. So that is just going to prove that Yah didn't place his name anywhere that we choose. Yah was very specific in placing his name in one specific tribe. You see how specific Yah is about things? And he doesn't leave any room for you to surmise or you to guess or you to have a belief about it. He's very specific in telling us. We just have to listen to what he's saying. So that's where you bring the tithes to Jerusalem. That's where you bring the offerings to Jerusalem. That's where you do the worship, Jerusalem. That's where you bring the burnt offerings and do the burnt offerings and the sacrifices in Jerusalem. No place else. So we had to bring that out because there was some false doctrine going around stating that because you don't see the word Jerusalem in the Old Testament writings, that Jerusalem at the temple is not the place where Yah placed his name. And so we know that according to verse 10, but when you go over Jordan and dwell in the land which Yah, your source of power, gives you to inherit, and when Yah has given you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety. So this is why we went to the story of King David, because that took place during the life of King David. And in 2 Samuel 7, the very first verses in 2 Samuel 7 says, and it came to pass when King David sat in his house, and Yah had given King David rest round about from all his enemies. This is when the kingdom was united. No more enemies. David had defeated all of them. So the whole kingdom was united as one. And so that's when Yah chose to reveal what he was talking about in Deuteronomy 12, that he was not going to reveal it until the time of rest for the kingdom. And so then we know the rest of the story as we went over earlier. The Most High allowed King Solomon to build a house for his name, which is David's son. King David had a son named King Solomon. King Solomon built a house, which is called Solomon's Temple. That's the house for the name of Yah, and that was in Jerusalem, and that was where all the tithes and the offerings and the burnt sacrifices and the 3 annual pilgrimage festivals were celebrated, as well as that is where Yah's worshiping place was. Now, so we wanted to cover that because there's definitely, so that lets you know as well that you just can't worship Yah wherever you want to. You can't set up nothing in your backyard and say, I'm worshiping Yah, unless your backyard is in the temple in Jerusalem. So we also went over the fact that the Israelites did not celebrate these 3 harvest pilgrimage festivals while they were in captivity because they couldn't. And just the very fact that these are harvest pilgrimage festivals. Think about that word. It's a pilgrimage festival. In Acts chapter 2, look at all the people that, go read Acts chapter 2. You'll see all the people that made a pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of Pentecost, which was during the time of the harvest, the summer harvest. It's a pilgrimage. Now let's look at being in captivity. While the Israelites were in captivity in Babylon, they could make a pilgrimage. The very word captivity itself tells you this is a people that's being held captive. When you have someone in captivity, you are holding them and restraining them from leaving. That's what the very word means. So King Nebuchadnezzar and the other Nebuchadnezzar that came behind him, these Babylonian kings, they tore down the house in Jerusalem and carried away the Israelites into captivity and held them in Babylon. So 3 times a year, they did not let them, thousands and thousands of Israelite people leave and go back to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. They were being held captive. So the very term itself, captivity, lets you know that they did not celebrate a pilgrimage festival while being in a captivity. They couldn't, or they wouldn't have not been in a captivity. So this is to show that when you read Daniel chapter 10, as we discussed, in Daniel chapter 10, we discuss how in the very first verses of Daniel chapter 10, Daniel said he was in mourning for 3 full weeks. He didn't eat any meat. He didn't drink no wine. He didn't eat no bread. He was in mourning for the first 3 weeks of the first month. And we all know that the first month of the Hebrew calendar is the month for the festival of unleavened bread, where you are commanded to eat meat. And that meat is the Passover lamb. And so we see that Daniel did not celebrate Passover while in a captivity because he was a captive. And the festival itself of unleavened bread, Pentecost, and Tabernacles is a pilgrimage festival where you would have to travel from Babylon to Jerusalem. And that was not allowed. Massive? You mean to tell me during this captivity for 70 years, every year, the king of Babylon, you mean to tell me that for 70 years, while the Israelites were in captivity in Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar and all the other Babylonian kings would allow the Hebrew Israelite people 3 times a year, thousands and thousands of them, to leave and go to Jerusalem to worship at a temple that's not there? That doesn't make any sense. And, again, there's a saying, if it doesn't make any sense, that means it's not true. If it's not scriptural, that means it's not true as well. So Daniel was lamenting about not being able to keep the festivals. I mean, he didn't eat any meat or anything in the first month. Definitely not celebrating Passover if you're not eating any meat, because the word Passover itself stands for sacrificial lamb or Pesach. So we also read about how Nehemiah and the Israelites of the captivity under the decree of Cyrus were allowed to go back and rebuild the temple. They were actually going back to rebuild the temple after the 70-year captivity was up, and they reinstituted the Passover. And that's in Ezra chapter 6, verse 19. And so many of you have a heading over your book, over your Bible, in Ezra chapter 6, right above verse 19, it'll say when the Passover was restored. So, that's the, so we brought that out, so we were bringing forth that information to you about the captivity just to show that during the Babylonian captivity, that will really destroy this false doctrine that the children of Israel or the Israelites celebrated all of the commanded holy days throughout all their dwellings and all their generations forever. I mean, that is impossible to do when you're in captivity, to celebrate these holy days. So some people are really stuck on this thing forever, but the other words, for some reason, like pilgrimage, harvest festival, for some reason, those don't mean what they mean. But anyway, we're not concerned with that. We also went over the fact that Jeremiah in the Lamentations clearly showed that he didn't celebrate any Sabbaths or holy days, because the temple and the place of the assembly for these things were destroyed. The places of assembly for the Sabbaths were destroyed. The temple of worship was destroyed. So he didn't celebrate any holy days or any Sabbaths. And you can read that in the book of Lamentations. And so this shows that without the proper resources that Yah set up to celebrate his holy days, you can't celebrate his holy days. And so when he takes them away so that you won't be able to celebrate his holy days. And anything outside of that is a man-made tradition. And we are not commanded to keep anybody's man-made tradition, full of all kind of Swiss cheese doctrine and loopholes and false teachings and all kind of stuff. You name it, they got it for you. And everywhere you go, it's something different on a different day. And over here, you do it that way. Over there, you do it another way. We're not commanded to take part in that. But for those who do, you do. But for those of us who don't, we won't, because it's not scriptural. So we covered that. Also, dear viewers, we took the time to cover something very important to you. Again, this is just a recap of our past shows in case you missed the shows. And again, if you want copies of the past shows, just send us an email at the email address that you see below, and we'd be more than glad to send those out to you for free. Now, we also covered the fact that if you are living under the curses of Deuteronomy 28, which we are today, you cannot celebrate the blessings of Leviticus 23, the holy days, Leviticus 24, the holy days, Leviticus 25, the holy days, Numbers chapter 10, the holy days. Deuteronomy 28 blessings, verses 1 through 15, are interconnected. They go hand in hand with the blessings of Leviticus 23, Leviticus 24, Leviticus 25, and Numbers chapter 10. Most Israelite communities I know would tell you they're living under the curses of Deuteronomy 28. If that be true, which it is, then you definitely are not living under the blessings of Leviticus 23, Leviticus 24, and Leviticus 25, and Numbers chapter 10. Absolutely no way, unless you are celebrating your holy day. And again, we call it holy days because that's what's taking place when people try to go in Leviticus 23 and insert their man-made traditional views and set up something that they call holy days and have people worshiping wherever, whenever, and however they have individually set up. And again, this is a warning so that we won't fall prey to this false doctrine and end up getting cut off. But some people, regardless of whatever facts are brought forth on this program, they're going to preach to you Leviticus 23 come hell or high water, because it's just like trying to talk to people about Christmas. So just like Leviticus 23, 24, and 25, the false teachers will quick to tell you, we got to keep the holy days in Leviticus 23. And they believe that they are doing so. Some of them just don't know any better, but some people are just, and I'm just going to call it as I see it, some are just false teachers. But some people just don't know. But the fact of the matter is, none of us alive today have ever, and I do mean ever, celebrated the holy days in Leviticus 23. The only way to celebrate the blessings of the holy days in Leviticus 23 and Leviticus 24 and Leviticus 25 with the Sabbaths of the land and the Jubilee is when you are under the blessings of Deuteronomy 28. And you can't be under the blessings of Deuteronomy 28 celebrating holy days in Leviticus 23, 24, and 25 when you are under the curse of Deuteronomy 28. So, just because somebody's mouth is telling you that they are celebrating the holy days in Leviticus 23, that doesn't make it so. Just because somebody's mouth tells you that they are celebrating Christ's birthday on December 25th doesn't make it so. And because the religion that they've deceived themselves into believing is so ingrained in them, it is very hard for them to accept the truth. And so we're only sending this out to those who want to accept the truth. I'm not telling you that you have to be in the land to celebrate Leviticus 23 and have a harvest. Leviticus 23 is telling you that. And I didn't write Leviticus 23. So the next time you tell people that you are celebrating the holy days in Leviticus 23, please do yourself a favor. Tell them how you are offering up offerings and all of that and making your pilgrimage. And explain to them how you also are celebrating Leviticus 25. Because Leviticus 23, Leviticus 24, and Leviticus 25 are all dealing with Yah's Sabbaths. All of them. So they'll try to always point you to Leviticus 23. And then act like there's no Leviticus 24 and no Leviticus 25. And so what we're simply saying, people, is that you cannot celebrate Leviticus 23, 24, and 25 unless you are living under the blessings of Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 is hand in hand with the blessings of Leviticus 23, There are blessings in Deuteronomy 28. And there are blessings in Leviticus 23, 24, and 25. When you read it, that's a blessing to be able to participate in Leviticus 23. The curses are in Deuteronomy 28. So all throughout the Bible, the ones who celebrated holy days were celebrating the blessings of Leviticus 23, 24, and 25 and Numbers 10. And they were celebrating the blessings of Deuteronomy 28 from the wilderness period all the way up to 70 AD. This is what they were celebrating. But once the curses kicked in 70 AD, and Yah finally, for the last time, tore down his temple, kicked his people out of the land, and brought the Romans in to sweep up the business, that was a wrap for the holy days, and that was a wrap for the blessings. And what we're waiting on is the restoration of the Israelite people to truly be able to celebrate Leviticus 23, 24, and 25, just like the children of the captivity did during the Babylonian period. They didn't celebrate no holy days in captivity. So the first holy day was instituted in Egypt, which was unleavened bread, and the last holy day was in Jerusalem in 70 AD, and it also was a Passover. So there has been no other holy day, festival, feast days of Yah since 70 AD. There has been no holy day that Yah has ordained since 70 AD, which goes to show that only Yah set up a time for celebration of his holy days. We're now living in the time of the Gentiles, and this is Satan's kingdom. And we should all be doing as Daniel and Jeremiah would be doing during the holy day period or during that time of year, and that's fasting, lamenting, and praying instead of trying to party and resurrect something that only Yah can set up and ordain. Here's a quote from the writings of Flavius Josephus. It's the War of the Jews, War 6.9.3, 421 to 435. You might want to look this up when you get into the writings of Flavius Josephus, who actually saw the account of the massacre during the festival of unleavened bread in Jerusalem in 70 AD. Now, the numbers of those that were taken captive during the whole war was calculated to be 97,000, and those that perished during the siege, 1,100,000. Of these, the greater part were indeed of the same nation, but did not live in the city itself, for they had come up from throughout the country to the feast of unleavened bread, and were suddenly shut up by an army, which immediately occasioned so great distress among them that there came a pestilential destruction, and soon afterward a famine that destroyed them even more swiftly. But now the entire nation was shut up by fate as in a prison, for the Roman army surrounded the city when it was crowded with inhabitants. For when everyone in sight had either been killed or taken captive, the Romans began to search the subterranean passages, broke up the ground, and killed everyone they met. They also found over 2,000 people dead. So continue to read. For time's sake, I'm going to cut that short, but that's Flavius Josephus, The War of the Jews, 6.9.3, 421 to 437, on how the worshipers who had come up to the final holy day ever on this planet were trapped in the devastation. And one final note pertaining to the writings of Flavius Josephus. It's entitled War 5.3.1, 98 to 105. And the heading is Passover 70 CE, the last Passover in the Second Temple. And we all know that Flavius Josephus went on to live many years after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. And he's letting us know right here in his own very own writings that this was the last Passover unleavened bread celebration. And if there had been any other ones, he would have let us know. So once again, I was just giving a brief rundown of what we've covered so far. And the reason we've done this topic was so that none of us would end up being cut off trying to follow the ways of King Jeroboam. This is what you see taking place. And this is to the newcomers, because we know the old guard standing over the Leviticus 23 holy days, trying to prop them up. They will not be moved. They will sit up all night trying to conjure up in their head something to make you believe they are truly celebrating Leviticus 23. We know that, and I know that. So this is not any condemnation of them. This is just a fact. And so for those of you all who are being led to follow those traditions, at least if you read Deuteronomy 28 first, read Deuteronomy 28 first, the curses and blessings, or the blessings and curses. Then read Leviticus 23, 24, and 25. And this will let you know whether or not you are truly celebrating those things in Leviticus 23, 24, and 25. That way you will have an educated way of making a decision on whether you want to follow them or not. A lot of it is just, the unlearned teaching the unlearned. This is an exhortation, warning. I am not trying to be critical of anyone. This is a warning, so that we won't get cut off, so that others won't get cut off following some mess that somebody done set up because they didn't know any better. And so this is why I'm so vocal about it, because there's so much going on in this, and only Satan will tell you to read something of the Most High's word and then get you to follow something else. In Yah's name, we bid you peace. Till next time. And thanks for tuning in. Shalom.
Freedom, set the captives free. Freedom, it's the right to be. Freedom, all they need is freedom. They yearn to be free. They're yearning to be free. Yearning to be free. Free. Oh freedom, oh freedom. In the soul of every nation, there's a burning fire. They yearn to be free from the bonds of a spiritual, mental, and physical oppression. They yearn to be free. Set the captives free. Freedom, surely it's the right to be. Freedom, all they need. They yearn to be free. Yearn to be free. Yearn to be free. Set the captives free, Set the captives free.